I really need to get a soundboard for the show and these pre-show ads. I was just about to do that obnoxious blowhorn or loud horn, whatever it's called, sound with my mouth, that to let you know that you found episode 58 of Enemy of the State's Dank Pod-Stash. Yes. Hey, for real though, last week I mentioned a new segment for the Pod-Stash coming out, Dank Pod-Stash Hot Tokes with my homie Daniel Johnson. Well, the first one is dropping tomorrow for $1 patrons and up, of course. If you're paying more than that, you're definitely getting early access to Dank Pod-Stash Hot Tokes. So make sure to check that out. If you're not a patron, it's coming out on Wednesday too. Don't worry, you're going to find it. Definitely check that out. New awesome things in the works for the Pod-Stash. Go to thedankpodstash.com or patreon.com/thedankpodstash and see what all is there. And before we get into the show, I cannot forget to remind you about the special offer for you from our friend of the show, author and content creator Shane Radliff of Liberty Under Attack Publications. You can take 10% off your order by using coupon code DANK10 at libertyunderattack.com. You can get books focusing on self-liberation, freedom strategy, solutions, and more. His current books, #Agora, second round book on strategy, Ben Stone's Sedition, Subversion, and Sabotage, and Shane's very own Vanu, a strategy for self-liberation. They also offer assistance to new authors through the publishing process, including editing, proofreading, formatting for Kindle and paperback, and full-service audiobook productions. That's Liberty Under Attack Publications. Share your story, find your freedom, and, of course, a shout-out to Bad Moon Hemp. badmoonhemp.wordpress.com is where you can find all your hemp needs, all your handmade hemp needs. I use their beard oil and beard balm. It's amazing. Go check it out. And now, prepare yourselves for a conversation with a dude that I've been trying to get on the show. We've had some scheduling difficulties, but it's finally happened. Episode 58 of the Dank Pod-Stash with Bert Badskins Adkins.
Enemy of the state.
An enemy of the state.
Enemy of the state.
Dank Pod-Stash.
You're listening to Enemy of the State's Dank Pod-Stash. Check out thedankpodstash.com to find every episode of the Dank Pod-Stash, links to support the show via our BitBacker and Patreon, Dank Pod-Stash merchandise, and much more. If you'd like to advertise on the Dank Pod-Stash, email us at dankpodstash@gmail.com. Brett Adkins, good to finally get you on the show, my man. It's been a little bit of a struggle getting together at the same time.
Yeah, we've had a few technical difficulties, haven't we?
Oh yeah.
But yeah, it's good to talk to you, you beautiful bearded bastard.
Thank you. Yeah, this show is pretty much entirely technical difficulties, so that's par for the course. Hell yeah, man. So, I guess
Yeah.
let me preface this. Get the listeners getting to know you. Maybe start just telling us how you came to anarchy, and we'll run from there.
Yeah, there was no. I grew up in a really heavily Republican family. You know, doing the whole fishing, hunting, outdoors type life. So it just kind of, everybody leaned right. And I just followed the mold up until I was, in my early 17, 18, 19. I think I probably started questioning the status quo. But I kind of just went right along with all of the talking points. Republicans are pro-gun and small government and limited government and all that bullshit that goes along with it. And just became really just organically became disillusioned with the whole system. Not there was no aha moment where I realized that the state was bullshit. It kind of just evolved. Became disillusioned with the system, and then the internet,
Yeah.
Started seeing, I think I was anarchist, like you hear a lot of people say. I've heard a number of people on your show say, they think they were anarchists before they ever really came to the conclusion themselves that they were in fact anarchists. You know, I think I was and didn't even know it, and then came across. If there's any one, you know, writer or philosopher or whatever that I would say was my biggest influence, it would probably be Tolstoy.
Oh, nice.
And reading Government is Violence, A Confession, and The Kingdom of God is Within You were like my big. He you know, he's a great commie, man. he succinctly and very, very nicely put on display the hypocrisy of government and religion. You know, he was excommunicated from the church and risked death. He risked his execution to write the things he wrote. So that's probably my major influence, you know, and then the rest of it I've taken in piecemeal. You know, I'm not this huge like into philosophy guy. You know, I haven't read Rothbard and Rand. I have a signed copy of Atlas Shrugged, but I've never read it, you know. Sure. So I'm not gonna. I don't try to present myself as some master in anarchist philosophy. I just keep it really simple.
Yeah. You don't get lost in the weeds that way, for sure. I'm definitely very similar with that. I enjoy Agora's philosophy, and that's why I stick with that theme through most things. But yeah, I've only scratched the surface of most others. I agree. Keeping it simple is the way to go. And that's kind of how we found each other too. You know, internet homies, memes, keeping it simple.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's the other thing. I don't even know how I found all you fuckers on the internet, to be honest with you. I think
you heart reacted one of my memes, bro. Guarantee that's it.
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah, the memes bring us together for sure.
Yep. And you know, speaking of memes bringing people together, I don't think it was even as big as it is now last week for last week's episode, but the Epstein didn't kill himself meme traveling into the mainstream and getting people to questions pretty fucking interesting. And I think it's funny. There's a lot of people who are saying, God damn it, I'm sick and tired of seeing the fucking Epstein didn't kill himself. Why are you still doing this? Like, even among anarchists and libertarians. And it's like, look around, man. There's normies. There's people who have no idea about what that even means that are now looking into it because it's fucking everywhere.
Yeah, it's gone completely viral, and I mean, you saw the Fox News video, I'm sure, of the military dog trainer guy who didn't kill himself at the end of the video. And this isn't because of any type of media. This is all grassroots people just continuously. Yeah, are the memes stupid? Sure. Are some of them, is it, you know, redundant? And you kind of get sure. I mean, I know Epstein didn't kill himself. I'm 99% certain. So I don't need to see him over and over again. But yeah, like you said, there's a lot of people that are seeing that. You start looking into it, and then you start asking yourself questions. And you know, I like to think that when you start asking questions, you naturally start asking more. So hey, if they're covering this up, what else are they covering up? So the Epstein memes are great, and I'll keep making them.
Yeah, hell yeah.
I don't even care if they get.
Yeah, they're always fun too. And the disconnect, I can't remember if I've brought it up on the show or not. I can never remember from show to show, but I find it disappointing how things kind of fizzle out. I always have big hope, you know, once the Epstein meme spreads around, maybe something will happen. But it's the same thing with like Area 51 or any other, you know, mass, you know, cultural awareness that kind of fizzles into nothing. And I've been looking at the global protests. Shout out to Rachel Nielsen for making that map and throwing that up. I'll see if I can snag that image and put it somewhere on the Pod-Stash. But there's global protests everywhere.
I saw that map.
Yeah, it's sick. And there's more happening every day.
Yeah, nice.
And I'm looking at the fucking reasons for these protests. And I think it's an older protest, but I believe it was in Chile or Argentina or something. There's an anti-cop dog, this black stray dog with a red bandana that hated fucking cops and would just go nuts at them and would hang out with the protesters and like kind of march with them and stuff. And I'm looking at them like, okay, so why are these guys protesting? And they're protesting not being able to get free schooling. I'm like, Jesus Christ, they got riots in the street over not getting free schooling. We got a government that's keeping, tons and tons of secrets from us. And then some of them like massive child trafficking and pedophile rings among rich, famous, and politicians. And there's nobody in the streets fucking shit up now. Like, what the hell?
Well, we're a complacent society, and I think that has a lot to do with distraction. Humans are societal, and they're gonna watch the media and watch the news and watch everything we're inundated with 24/7. And the way you think and the way you conduct yourself is going to be kind of controlled. Mm-hmm. A lot of these conspiracies, I mean, there's nothing more too outlandish anymore.
Right.
You have these declassified reports, all kinds of, and it's like, you want to tell yourself, there's no way that's real. That can't be real. But the government themselves are releasing reports and all of these, where you're going, okay, they're telling us it's real. What else are they capable of? So, and are people rioting in the streets? No, I mean, it was determined that the FBI and they were in on the MLK assassination. That was the government released that information. And do people care? No.
Yeah.
You get it's a sad state of affairs for sure.
Yeah, and I think it definitely all comes down to comfort. People are, when they're comfortable, they're not going to go into the streets and do that stuff. But then I see, like I mentioned before, yes, the free tuition thing. And it's like, how uncomfortable.
The power goes out.
What's that?
Yeah, go ahead. I cut you off. You go ahead.
It's all good. I think you said it's when the power goes out or something like that. And yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I'm just alluding to losing a creature comfort.
Exactly.
Yeah, we're all great and dandy when we're chilling on our iPhones, but wait till what we think of as menial becomes something that is more important to you than money. I mean, your water gets shut off, your power goes out, and you'll see people in the streets.
Yeah.
But until then, we're all, just kind of going through the motions.
Well, and it's crazy too, because I feel it, and I know a lot of other people feel it, the minimum wage hikes, driving up prices for everyday necessities like food and whatever, anything that anybody's providing that from a business that they're having to compensate for paying people more via government mandate. The tariffs and whatnot, steel is going up, all that, or has been going up. All this stuff is going up from government mandated changes. Yeah, aluminum, all kinds of shit. And it's getting harder and harder to live for a whole lot of people. And I just don't know when it's going to be too hard, when it's going to finally snap and we're going to see whether it's a boogaloo or protests or whatnot. And I don't know. I sent you those videos before the show about Deutsche Bank possibly declaring bankruptcy and a global economic domino effect and whatnot. And I think just prepping for that kind of thing is good, but it's really hard to prep without knowing what's coming. And we think something's coming, but they keep inflating that balloon. And that's what worries me, is that they're going to keep pumping that thing up until it pops, but no one's going to see it coming. And it's going to be a massive global catastrophe, and it's going to be maybe even too hard to boogaloo.
Yeah. Well, you might be too prone to thinking of self-survival rather than boogaloo.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
those videos, like I said, I'm not the most economically literate fella, but I mean, it doesn't take much to realize you can't print your way out of debt, and you can't just flood markets with fucking imaginary money, and create debt out of thin air and expect the bubbles not to burst. And the whole world is running on, basically, we don't have a one world currency, but it's all basically the same monetary system is in place. So, the domino effect that those videos alluded to were interesting and frightening, but part of me wants to see all that happen at the same time. I mean, it's, we need a forest fire.
Yeah.
And, but the thing that scares me is if that's manufactured, which we kind of talked about a little bit.
Sure.
As if the whole thing is engineered, But then we start really tightening up our tinfoil hats.
Yeah. Well, and it's only tinfoil to a certain extent because, like we mentioned just a minute ago, they release things like Agenda 21, and there's speeches out there by people who are the wealthiest in the world, not only with money but with power, about population control. Like that's a real agenda, and I guess the tinfoil hat gets tightened up when you think, okay, so do they want to go hide underground during this massive collapse and massive die-off of the population until they can come back with the wealth they've amassed and control a smaller population much more easily? And what do we do about that? And that definitely ties into stuff that we've talked about a lot, and then it's like notes you sent me before this show of stuff to talk about. And it's infighting among people who are against something like that happening, against global control, government control in any form, versus building communities.
Correct. Yeah. First of all, I wear my tinfoil hat with pride. So I take that as a term of endearment. Yeah, the infighting. Well, look, for one thing, it can get boring, right? We're all these people who have a general consensus. We don't like the government. We want the government out of our lives, blah, blah, blah. And I think maybe we reach a point where we're not really doing anything out in the real world. So we just start fighting amongst ourselves on the internet, because it's easy to do. I feel like, I don't know what it is with people, but especially large groups of people, it seems like fighting is easier than coming together, and we all have different views and opinions and all of that. But yeah, like I said, that's one of my biggest critiques of the community is the propensity to cannibalize itself. And while we're all fighting over Kropotkin versus Rothbard or whatever, the government, the Leviathan of government continues to enlarge, continues to get bigger. We keep, and we're fighting amongst ourselves, but it also feels like a losing battle when, we're pretty small. There's millions, there's 300 million people in America,
Right.
So we're a tiny percentage, but I think we're getting louder.
I think so. I think that the global protests are not necessarily obviously not from the small population of anarchists and or libertarians in the U.S., but I think the global protests are evidence of a global mindset shift towards not being happy with the way that governments are doing things everywhere. Governments, or even doesn't even have to be government, but how groups of people are running different things or inserting their will into people's personal lives. I'm hoping, and that was kind of my pushback for that first point that you had brought up in the notes that you sent me a while ago. So we don't need to get too deep on that, but let's see. So just what we're seeing on Facebook or whatever, because, no matter how hard you try to avoid it, it's a bit of an echo chamber, and you think things are shifting in your personal world. And in reality, it's probably not that big of a shift, but things like global unrest do give me some hope.
Yeah, and I would agree. The frustrating part for me is I see, like the Hong Kong protests and all over the world. And what you see is, they're protesting. France is a good example. But they're still going to the government to fix the government. It's still status protests. There's no push to remove government. It's saying we just need a better government.
Right.
That's the one. Hey, people just can't wrap their minds around no government. How about we just eliminate it? And it's so entrenched in the world and in the psyche of humanity that it's impossible to pull that out of people's brains, it seems like. In my experience, almost everybody I've met that is anarchist already had a questioning type personality, right? They already had that personality type to question, and maybe were rebels as growing up, not necessarily, crazy, but just kind of always questioned the status quo, always questioned why they had to do this, why I had to go to public school, why I had to, sit through these monotonous lessons that I never really carried into my real life in any capacity whatsoever. And
Yeah, absolutely.
I just lost my train of.
It's all good. Yeah, no, you're 100% right. I find the real life conversations are always much better than the online conversations. But to play devil's advocate for the people who have who are emphasizing economics as the path towards freedom, let's call out specifically ANCAPs and maybe Austrian economics, right?
Sure.
That's the path to freedom in their mind. If you build that economic model to try to bring freedom without having, like you mentioned, questioning minds, people who are willing to question and entertain the idea of total personal freedom. If you're just bringing in a different economic model, that's just another thing to abuse, that people are going to be able to abuse and turn into something bad. And I mean, maybe that shows my ignorance of economics, but I think that, like you mentioned, the questioning mindset and the willingness to take personal responsibility and the want for freedom no matter what is much more important as far as an avenue towards getting there versus any economic model.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, why are we so hung up on economic models? And I hear, I see the people arguing on the internet constantly. Well, because we need to establish, we have to have something established before we are state free or blah, blah, blah. And part of me just says, well, if I'm stuck into one economic model, am I free?
Right.
That's why I lean towards agorism. I don't want to be stuck to one currency or one economic type of model. But, sometimes I feel like ANCAPs just become, a lot of times they're just ideologues for capitalism. And I'm all about capitalism. I'm definitely not a communist by any means, but I believe that there should be a wide array or a very, a collection of ways for people to sustain themselves economically.
Sure.
I know ANCAPs like to always say, well, you're welcome to in an ANCAPistan, and in ANCAPistan, you're more than free to do whatever you want. You can have a commune if you want, and blah, 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 as long as it's all voluntary. But if my economic model is not voluntary and that's blanketed across a society, because, we live in a society, then how free am I really?
Sure. Yeah, and I've said it once, I'll say it again. If I've said it once, I've said it a million times, and I'll say it again. Let me get that phrasing correct. It doesn't really, I mean, if one model is the best, then it's going to win out in a free market.
Yes.
And so what's the rush to push something so hard now versus letting things play out and seeing what's the best, seeing what works for people, for the individual the best?
Yeah. And my point is my major point is I just hate that we're all so stuck on the economic model and economic theory and all of these types of things when really we should just be concerned with hate for the state at this moment and ending it and trying to win hearts and minds in that way. I don't need to argue with another anarchist. I really don't. What's the point? Like as long as, well, which I told in the notes too, as long as you think you own you and I own me, and I'm free to do what I want and you're free to do what you want, then I don't need to argue with you anymore past that point. Whatever your beliefs are on economics or capitalism or communism, I don't really give a shit personally. Let's get together and fucking try to get other people to think at least somewhat the same way we do. I'm not trying to convert people to think exactly like me, because that goes against the very nature of what I think anarchism is. Mm-hmm. It's about being an individual. And I don't see, we're all individuals together a lot in this community, right? Sure. We parrot each other, see the same drawn out arguments one after the other. And the irony is that we're all talking about individualism as we all, puppet each other. So, but it's always going to exist within a community of people, and we all think like-minded. So of course, granted, we're going to have a lot of the same thoughts. So Sure. It's going to be an echo chamber, and that's not always a bad thing. I don't know. I feel like if we all kind of got off the internet a little bit and just within our little bubble, at least this is how I operate. You know, I'm not a big liberty movement out there in the streets. I'm not. Within my little bubble, I try to perpetuate anarchy in every possible way that I can. I hide from the state. I try not to pay any taxes, you know, blah, blah, blah. And that's kind of affects the people around you and within my family unit. So I don't know. I feel like the fighting on the internet can just get to be, I mean, I've ceased to do it entirely. I don't do it. I don't even debate status, period. There was a period in my time when I first started coming over, you know, I like fucking lived to debate status on Facebook. And now I don't even bother, you know, I just shit post and sometimes they get people talking and sometimes they're garbage, but I just keep doing it. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Hopefully we can get some, because we're both up here in Washington. Hopefully we can get some, you know, face-to-face meetups of the community up here. It's always hard to organize that. Like Jeremy Harding, I remember when he first got up here, he started a messenger group and added everyone that he knew was in Washington. And in the first couple of minutes, people were just removing themselves from the group. It's like, okay, well, I don't know. How are we going to meet up if we all can't even talk via Messenger or something? But I did meet a really cool dude over this weekend who happens to know, and I'd never met him before. I didn't know him, but he happens to know some people that I know from Washington online. So hopefully we're going to get some anarcho barbecuing going on soon. And they have a pretty interesting community safety group going on. So I'm looking forward to doing that. I don't want to put too many specifics out on the show right now just in case they don't want that. But if you're in Eastern Washington specifically and you're interested in any of these meetups, hit me up on Facebook or anywhere you can get a hold of me, and we'll see what we can do.
Yeah, man, I am all about an anarcho barbecue. That sounds fantastic. We got to roast a pig though, right?
Yeah, you have to.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is, Tanner, you must roast a pig.
Yeah, it's multiple themes there. Roasting pigs, the big luau. We'll have it covered.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah, but that just face-to-face interactions are so much more rewarding. But it's part of
we're a lot more civil.
Yeah, we're like we were talking about being an individual, but also having community. I don't understand why that's such a block in people's mentality as well. You can be an individual within a community, you know, that you choose to associate with, and how the hell are you going to fight these battles without a community, anyways?
Right, and I think it's differences between people within a community that makes them stronger, though. You know. Yes, absolutely. You be a community, to be an individual within a community just means that you're in an environment where it's safe to question what the rest of the people are thinking or saying or doing or whatever. And you think critically about what it is you're a part of. What is the community about you're a part of? Blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And you know, that's what we lack. 100% lack in, well, just in America, we'll just say America, but the world, you know, is any type of, you know, it's black and white. You're either Republican or Democrat. I mean, basically, you know, or you're one of the, you know, majority of the populace that says they're one or the other, but they don't even vote anyway. So,
right.
You know, I find that pretty funny. The majority of people don't even vote as it is.
Right.
Like, are they anarchists and they just don't know it? Because you're not even voting. You're not helping. You're not even helping perpetuate the state. So I don't know. I laugh about that, but we just need to get the rest of the people to stop doing it.
That's interesting too, because I had never thought about it that way. I just figured people were too lazy or weren't interested in either one of the candidates. But you know, maybe there is a large population of those people who are anarchists and don't know it. It's something inside them. Like what in such a pushed patriotic environment, either patriotic or, you know, bleeding heart socialist environment, what is it going through people's minds if they're not an anarchist and they're not going and voting? That's interesting. That'd be a good campaign for lack of a better term, to try to get awareness of, not even necessarily a push towards anarchy right at first, but just individual responsibility to people who aren't voting in those mass numbers, because nobody won the election for 2016 according to voters, and I bet nobody will win the 2020 election. So how do we? Yeah, that's good, man. We gotta reach those people, see what they're all about.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, a lot of times it's probably just pure complacency, or what I hope is that a lot of them are in the mindset that their vote doesn't matter. And if they're already thinking that, but they still have a belief in government, but you've come to the conclusion that my vote doesn't matter, or it's not going to affect, then there is a small mustard seed of hope for that person, because they're starting to question. And then you try to kind of ease them towards the cliff of, hey, keep asking the question until you come to the conclusion that is government even necessary? And I think that's the eureka question, that when somebody asks themselves that and they come to the honest conclusion that no, it's not a necessary institution. It's interesting to.
It is, even without even that big of a leap of questioning whether or not government is necessary. The thing I find that's a nice, more safe, shorter step is asking them, could there be something better? And, that's obviously a trick question towards no government, but building the second realm, building the agora, that kind of thing, that people like that idea. They're like, oh yeah, maybe it doesn't have to be this system. And it's crazy, the questions that come up once people start entertaining that idea, and how unprepared I find myself for a lot of questions, despite having been in this for a bit. I guess, so I'm going to throw some at you too, because I've had this been happening with a couple people I know for a couple weeks now. But they're like, so what happens if the U.S., the continental U.S. is anarchist, government's gone, and all these other countries exist? How do we defend ourselves? I find myself falling back on the idea of private security, insurance companies, kind of borrowing from both agorist and capitalist perspectives. But it's something too that I think I'm more a lot of people are more willing to admit than others, is that statism will always exist in one form or another. It's not going away. And so being honest about that in these conversations as you're figuring out exactly, hey, what could we do, is a good thing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And as far as policing goes, look, 99% of our policing right now is done individually, right? In fact, I don't even have to go out and police myself. It's crazy. I go out and nothing happens to me.
Imagine that.
And I don't commit crime. At least I don't commit crimes that I think are crimes. So I think we make a really big deal about that, when in actuality, and police don't really stop crime as it is now. So, the status will say, or the argument, what we do about murders, and I've heard all kinds of just outlandish, for rape, the punishment should be for the rapee to rape the rapist. And I'm like, what are you talking about? That's crazy. But I think that what would happen would, most people would individually take it upon themselves to police themselves. An armed society is a polite society, right? And I think that communities would be self-sufficient in that capacity. I think they would come together and they would keep themselves safe. And you'll always have the crazy and the some shit go down. But I like to use what they refer to it as the Wild West, in the 1800s and up to the 1850s, 60s, whatever. It's portrayed as this outlaw, crazy, bullet-ridden murder fest, right? When in actuality, which it was when we were slaughtering Indians and having wars, but the communities that did exist were actually very safe, and there wasn't a high murder rate. There wasn't everybody, and there was no law, and there was no state. It was, sure, there were communities and it was still statist to a degree. You had people who were appointed positions for territories, but for the most part, it was lawless, quote unquote lawless, and they handled themselves just fine. Does that mean we'll have people in today's time? Will we be hanging people for theft and stuff? I don't know. I don't know what that looks like. I think if the government was to just disappear tomorrow and all of a sudden it's gone, I think there would be chaos. I think there would be chaos for a couple of years. I think it would go crazy because most people aren't even fucking ready. They're not ready for that, period. So there would be a period of lawlessness and crazy shit would happen. And then eventually, it would even out. And that's my 2 cents.
No, I agree. That's exactly what I think too. And as far as maybe not, because the illustration, the idea that the U.S. specifically falling into a state of no government tomorrow, and I don't want to say anarchy, because government just getting the rug pulled out from under them does not anarchy make. But the government gone tomorrow, no. Yeah, that's not what we're looking for. But so as far as that happening, and then the different states on a global level still existing and wanting to come in and do whatever they would want to do to the continental U.S., I would hope that it would be a slower route and a more peaceful route, or even if it was Boogaloo, that would still probably be slow enough to get to a point of statelessness in the continental U.S. And putting that 2 and 2 together, that with the global attitude that seems to be taking hold of dissatisfaction with government, I think that would be another domino effect, and that could start cascading into more stateless societies versus thinking that us here in North America would be isolated in a stateless place and have all these states coming down on us. I think it would be definitely a domino effect. I don't think we would just be, I don't think governments would last if the U.S. government fell. Because look at what they talk about with economic collapse. Like we mentioned before, the Deutsche Bank. What if the dollar collapses? That's a global catastrophe as far as economics and living. So that's a really weird question that people bring up, but I understand why they do.
Yeah. You mean the if there was no government tomorrow question?
Yeah. How would us here, and they still say the U.S. do, which is pretty funny. But how would us here in the U.S.?
It's a silly proposition to begin with because it will never happen that way. Sure. Obviously. But I think it's kind of fun to imagine what would happen, and I think it would be total mayhem. But we talk about world governments and around the globe, and we talk about them as these entities that are comprised of a lot of people, which they are obviously, but I like to more tinfoil hat shit. Are all these governments getting together and to they all know what's happening, right? Yeah. Like is Russia, dude? What did the CIA? What's that quote from the CIA director? When we believe, when everything we believe is a lie, they'll know they have had succeeded or whatever. So I don't even, and I'm getting off track. I know. I don't even know what's real, even at the things I question as far as like, are Russia and America even really enemies? I highly doubt it. I bet the banksters that run the world are just laughing at the chaos that all of us are creating.
Sure. I mean, and the UN exists, right? This is a global collaboration of governments.
Well, exactly, and they're pitting the people, us, against each other, and not them, not the people that make up the government. Mm-hmm. They're not fighting each other. They're just raking in money off of war, banking, mm-hmm. and that. So, yep, it's freaky.
That is an interesting thing too. I've been kind of looking into. Someone mentioned the other day how Apple is pulling out a lot of production from China. Due to the tariffs that Trump has brought against China. And they were saying, it might be gearing up for war because they're pulling out faster and faster. But that's been happening since these things were put in place. I think since July. I just can't see China and the U.S. going to war in a traditional way, you know. But seeing the BRICS alliance, you know, Brazil, Russia, Brazil, Russia, I don't remember what the fuck, China, South America, maybe it's India, starting to dump petrodollars at ports and things like that. That's interesting because that means people aren't cooperating. And I don't think it'll be a, you know, boots on the ground sort of war. I think we're already in a trade war with a lot of different people. And I think instead of the way that people see, you know, fucking Red Dawn paratroopers coming in from Russia or China or whatever, it's going to be fought through sanctions and tariffs, and it's going to end up with poverty, and that's what's going to cause. Yeah, exactly. It's going to be fought through economics, and it's going to cause, back full circle to what we were talking about before, an economic collapse that may bring the boogaloo.
Right. Yeah. I don't, you know, what does that even look like? A full-on economic collapse? You know, we haven't experienced that in our lifetimes.
Right.
What happens when there isn't a Fed to bail out the, you know, that's the big mistake. All of these institutions need to fail. So we can look at all this as scary, because it is. Mm-hmm. But these institutions are set up to fail. The way that they operate is a Ponzi scheme. Mm-hmm. So it's inevitable that it collapses at some point. I mean, we've known this forever. So it might be the best thing that ever happens. But it comes back to the question: is if it's being manufactured? If there's a cable of people out there that want a worldwide economic collapse in order to make it easier to control the populace and blah blah blah. So I don't know that I believe that entirely, because I feel like if there was a full-on economic collapse, that the dollar collapsed and everything goes to shit, people are gonna go nuts. Mm-hmm. Maybe that would be a time, if I was to look at it, that would be the time for like a one world government, right? And now I know I'm getting into some biblical shit, but that would be the time for one person or entity to come and say, hey, I am much like Hitler in Germany after World War I, but think of that worldwide. Mm-hmm. I can get everybody back to being prosperous. We can blah, 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 and consolidate power into one, you know, unit rather than these world governments that we see, which is a frightening prospect.
Sure. Yeah. I can agree with that.
Outside the realm of.
Yeah. I can agree with that in fictional accounts, because I like reading about, you know, economic collapse, that kind of stuff. I love post-apocalyptic movies and stuff like that. But I think obviously a lot of it is based in research that people have done to make these stories seem realistic. And what you see a lot of times is UN boots on the ground in these places where they're involved in a collapse. Yeah. So yeah, that the one world government thing being set up during a situation like that is not far-fetched at all. But I think seeing those blue helmets would really get people going to reject that as well.
Well, and exactly, I agree. That's why I like to think that even if that is the case, and that there actually is this big plan for what they're going to do in an economic collapse, it might not survive, because the people themselves would say that might be finally the catalyst for the world to say, this system is fucking broken, mm-hmm. and we're not going to allow another one to take its place. Whatever does take its place, I think would happen in communities. And that's the way I think it needs to happen. I think we need to be a group, you know, a community-based civilization, not these giant overreaching fucking governments or whatever it is, like social fucking committees. I don't care if you're a zoning board.
Yeah.
It's gotten ridiculous. Like, I'm going off topic now. You know, it's if you don't have your driver's license in Washington State now, you can't put a vehicle in your name. You can't purchase a vehicle and put it in your name. Like that's how overreaching the government's gotten. You can't even buy a fucking car. Like what?
Right.
Um,
Yeah. It's ridiculous. And all these things that they have in place. So if we ever did face a collapse and communities and people help each other out to the point of stabilizing and being able to live, and then all of a sudden somebody comes out from, say, DC again or the UN and says, all right, you guys did great. We're here to help with nothing to show for it, but this guy's your new president, so you got to listen to him. You get laughed out of that
Right.
area or fucking shot up out of that area.
Yeah, yeah. I think the only way that now, if people are lacking water and amenities, you know, that's then you take those people in because they're offering you a way out, right?
Right.
Survival. So it's tricky.
Well, the thing is, if everything fails as far as government structure goes, it's not like the people who run the dams around here that provide power and get the water moving are just going to keel over and die because
yeah, I know. And that's one of my favorite arguments all the time is like, it's, you know, all the people that push the buttons and pull the levers and do all of the shit are not the government, right?
Right.
The government doesn't do anything. So if they weren't to exist tomorrow, we could all still just continue on in the same way if we really wanted to.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, so
every single question that's like that starts with "without the government, how would X happen?" comes down to government's not doing that.
The same way it does right now.
Yeah, exactly. Government's taking your money and paying and, you know, using it very poorly and paying off a bunch of favors and finally getting around to hiring outside contractors to take care of this stuff.
Right. And hiring a private company to come do the shit that they could have just been hired to do from us. So, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I you know, especially when you're talking to the hardcore status, you know, it's like they think Paul Ryan is out there filling potholes or something. It's fucking hilarious.
Oh man, I'd like to see that though. That'd be a much easier target for piss-filled water balloons or something like that. That'd be fun if government officials actually went out to do stuff physically. That'd be great.
Well, it would make them a lot easier to tar and feather. I can tell you that.
Yes, that's what we need to bring back is tarring and feathering. But real quick,
I really think that's kind of.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you seen? So this is something I've been following, obviously, because I live here in Washington. But the $30 car tab initiative, that dude, I can never remember his fucking name. Pushed through and just
Tim Eyman.
Yeah, Eyman and King County. You know, all the King County big government people are losing their shit. Just smear campaigns against this guy and videos coming out online of him stealing a chair from Office Depot, which is fucking hilarious.
Yeah, and that video is super old too. It's years old. What I try not to ever watch the local news and shit, but I caught a bit of it the other night, and it was this whole guilt trip, man, about the $30 car tabs, and they showed a guy in a wheelchair who's on the bus, you know, and he's gonna lose his bus privilege. They're gonna cut the funding to the buses. Basically, what the people voted for. Now they're trying to make us guilt trip us into giving them money that they already can't fucking manage at all. I mean, I don't know if you followed how over budget they are on the tunnel and the express, you know, the railway, the light rail, billions over budget. And they're mad that at what point do people say we can't? I don't know what happened there. You froze on me and blacked out.
Yeah, same here. That's exactly what happened on my end too. You froze and I was staring at the screen for a minute. Sometimes it catches back up, but that's okay. We're back. Either way, state of Washington mismanages money, obviously, just like any other state. I just love, I love using this state as a perfect example of why voting is fucking useless all the time. Because the perfect example is the income tax. Supposedly people have voted it down for 85 years. And throughout that 85 years, they've taxed anything and everything else they possibly can besides income. And it all is a wash. It's the same as any other state that has an income tax. It's the same amount, if not more taxes coming out in one way or another for whatever quote unquote services. And now they want to have a closed door vote of just the politicians passing an income tax, but at least I don't have a fucking income tax, right? And it's just a joke. It's a smoke and mirrors game, just like it is everywhere. And it just takes a little bit of looking and following the money to see that.
Yeah. The other funny thing about Washington, which it's not just Washington. There's a lot of other states, California being one. The discrepancy between the geographical regions, like when you have King County runs the entirety of this state, basically just through mass numbers. The entire most of the population is in King County, but people don't realize that Washington is mostly farming and desert even and rural, and those people are paying for everything that happens in Seattle. They pay the taxes for the light rail and the tunnel that's going in or is now in. They're paying for all of that shit. I'm going, that it's a good descriptor of why voting doesn't work. Like,
sure,
for the good of all. But
yeah,
well, my grandparents in Moses Lake don't get any of the bullshit.
Like we said at the beginning of this,
my whole internet shut down for a second. It was
shit.
Great timing.
Love it. Yeah. Well, like you said, this whole show is technical difficulties, but it's all good. We're almost to the hour mark anyways, my man. But crap, now I've lost my train of thought. As far as the Washington state tax bullshit is.
I was rambling. Yeah, I was rambling about Washington.
Oh, yeah, that's what it was in those videos I sent. I'll link that YouTube channel in the description too if anybody wants to watch the YouTube videos that we were talking about earlier about the Deutsche Bank and economic problems coming. They mentioned a massive amount of farm failures in the U.S. And I was thinking in my head that the relationship between the farm failures and how these rural farming communities are paying for King County's bullshit, and it's the same everywhere.
Yes.
So yeah, it's interesting because the farms are failing, and then the government's bailing them out. Like I know,
yes, that was going to be my point.
Yeah, I know someone recently that has had 500 acres of unharvestable wheat because of some sort of storm or freak weather incident or whatever that laid it all over. So it just can't be harvested laying over. And so they have to wait until government can come in and pay them after they've supposedly made an attempt at harvesting it for shit that can't even be used.
Right.
So yeah, hyper efficient. It's the power strip plugging into itself to get more power. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
That's the funny thing is while these farms are failing, I think it was Wisconsin had like 46 farms that filed for bankruptcy, but at the same time they're being subsidized.
Yeah.
So yeah, like you said, it doesn't make any sense.
No, none at all. None at all. And yeah, I don't know. It's just wild. It's wild how this stuff is supposed to work according to government and the hoops they jump through and the weird connections they make. But we all know that. Everybody listening knows that. So let's call our show, man, before we get bombarded with more internet failures and stuff. And we'll jump into the Patreon after hours for the supporters of the show. You can come check that out at see the link on the page if you're watching on YouTube at patreon.com/the Dank Pod-Stash. If you're not watching on YouTube, go like and subscribe. Subscribe no matter what podcast you're watching on. Leave a review. Love to hear from you, and that helps the show out for absolutely free. And if you want to throw a little cash this way, keep the show going, make it better, like I said, patreon.com/the Dank Pod-Stash, thedankpodstash.com. Anywhere you can find the Dank Pod-Stash. I'd love to see your feedback. So remember, total freedom, no exceptions. Thanks, my man, Brett Adkins, for coming on the show. That was awesome. Can't wait to do the after hours.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. It was a fun time.
Hell yeah. We'll do it again sometime.
Zombie presidents, what anarchy! Zombie presidents!